Welcome to Fans Without Borders. I'm Brent.
And I'm Ray. What are we doing?
We're doing it again. You know, people seem to like it the last time, and we've got a build-up of questions. So we're like, let's just do a second episode this week. And unlike last time, we just didn't tell anyone it was coming.
I was gonna say we gave no warning whatsoever. This is a surprise episode.
Hopefully, it will be a pleasant one. Hopefully, people will appreciate the surprise.
Well, we'll see, because it's Q&A. You never know. We might give a wrong answer.
Well, we'll see. You never know. But before we get to that, we should mention the rest of the network. We've got, of course, Tim and Scott doing DC Film Squadcast, Chris and Jordan at DC Comics Squadcast, Brock and I still are doing Marvel Squadcast, and Ray, you've got DC TV Squadcast, and I remembered, sorry Chris's Horror Comics Podcast is now a part of our network as well. So we've got all kinds of shows for people to check out.
Yes, we do. Quite the lineup we have, for sure. And, of course, we also want to take a moment to thank all of our supporters on Patreon. Really do appreciate your support. Hope that you're enjoying the Patreon content. Movie Squadcast episodes. Sin City's the most recent one. Batman Returns, still in the hopper. At some point, we will schedule our Spider-Man with the perfectly coiffed hair from the 70s at some point. Brent has said on our earlier episode that he is past all of his scheduling conflicts, so there should be no excuses. He should not. He should. This will not be an Ang Lee's Hulk situation, because he is part of our Spider-Man crew. We need his input on this film, because he may have to help us. He may really have to help us.
I once said maybe I should have traded this for Ang Lee's Hulk, but that was too far. And that was just by virtue of Spider-Man. That was too far.
I was gonna say, like, is your dislike for Ang Lee's Hulk that bad?
I just don't like that movie.
Okay, fair enough.
And I will hopefully never see it again.
All right. Well, either way, there's those and tons of other Patreon content as well. Fans Without Borders Plus, Comics Corner, Scott Shots, tons of stuff up there, and more to come for sure. There's been, everyone in between life and everything. There's scheduling can be what it is, but we're always putting stuff on Patreon when we can. So we hope that you're all enjoying it, and as always, we cannot thank you enough for your support to the Squadcast Media Network.
Okay, let's get to it. First up from Tony, says, "Hi guys, not sure if Ray has seen all these, but I wanted to get your quick opinions on these lesser talked about Marvel shows." So, Ray, I'm going to say the show, and you can tell me you haven't actually watched it, and then I will say what I thought about it. So, Ray, Agent Carter.
Can I just say all of the above?
All right, so Ray hasn't seen any of these. You've seen one episode of one of them, I know.
Okay, all right. To be fair, I've seen at least one episode of two of these.
Oh, okay,
yes.
There you go. Yeah, all right. Agent Carter, cool show. I liked it a lot. I would have definitely enjoyed season 3 if they had done it. I hear everybody talk about how much better season 2 was. I just remember I enjoyed season 1 more than season 2, but season 2 wasn't bad. I liked it. So definitely a fun little Marvel thing, Marvel live action show. And, if you haven't seen it, it's set after the events of Captain America, the First Avenger. And it does have some involvement from Marvel Studios, and Marvel Studios effectively gave it its blessing by including Jarvis in Endgame anyway. Runaways and Cloak and Dagger. I want to mention these together because these two definitively take place together, because Cloak and Dagger had an appearance in the 3rd season of Runaways. They were in one episode of it. Runaways not as good as the book was, but pretty good. I enjoyed it. I watched Runaways with my wife. She liked it a lot. Cloak and Dagger, slow build up. Like once they got to we know how to use our powers now. For that show, I thought season 2 was much stronger than season 1. Not surprised. I'm really not surprised either of them didn't make it to a new season, but I wanted them to. I was enjoying both, and I would watch them today if there was more available. Legion, is that the one you've watched? Is that one you've watched a part of?
No, Legion is on my list to watch. But I haven't watched it yet. Listen, so many friends of mine have sung the praises of Noah Hawley and how amazing the show is. And I know it's technically part of the Dead Sea Shows list now because it's over. But it is on my radar. It is something that at some point I do want to watch. But no, I have not watched any of it yet.
Everybody who's talked to me about this show has said how good it is. I have a coworker of mine who, I would call him general audience, but he does like all the comic stuff. He is a huge fan of Legion and has told me several times I should be watching this show. And the reason I haven't is very small and petty, and I understand that. I have an irrational, borderline hatred for the main character. Not the actor, the character. I didn't like him in X-Men The Last Stand. I didn't like him when I've read him in comics, and I didn't like him in the X-Men 90s cartoon show when we've seen different takes on the son of Charles Xavier, and that's who the main character is. For whatever reason, I just don't like this character. And so I'm like, you know what? If it's a great show, I'm happy for you guys. I've never watched it, and honestly, I have zero plans to. I know it's a good one. Irrational.
That's quite the reason, but I applaud you for admitting how irrational and petty it is.
I totally get it. And I mean, basically, it would probably take for me to see this character in a movie, because I'm not going to not watch any of the movies where I liked him, to get me to second look that. But now, I didn't like him in the movie I saw. I didn't like him in the cartoon. I didn't like him in the comics. I'm not doing it.
So on record, when he's in the MCU,
yeah, I'm not going to watch it. It all depends on how they do with him. All depends on what they do with him.
It's the MCU.
But it will, I mean, that might be their true, well, no, their truest test with me is Mephisto. But aside from him, this might be the truest test. All right, the next show, one I know for sure you've seen at least the first episode of, because we talked about it a billion years ago on Fans, The Gifted. You only watched the pilot though, right?
Yeah, I did not dig further into it. I did. We really liked that pilot. It was an awesome pilot, but no, I didn't dive further into it.
I will tell you, I enjoyed the whole first season. I got 1 or 2 episodes into season 2, and then life got in the way, and I just kind of fell off of it, and I just never got back on. And so I've heard it ended pretty strongly. I just never got back to it. Not a case like the Legion. I wouldn't be opposed to it if for some reason I had the motivation to watch this one. I really don't know why I fell off of it. I just kind of did. Inhumans. So that must be the other one you watched the pilot of.
I watched the first couple of episodes of this. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You watched it. I thought after the pilot, after the first, I went to that Fathom event or whatever thing they called it, and I saw it in the movie theater. I liked the first episode. I was like, you know what? There's potential here. Is it as good as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? No. But is there potential? Yes. Did they do anything with that potential? Yes. They squandered all of it. All of it. By the end of it, if someone were to tell me it was the worst live-action Marvel TV show, I couldn't argue. It probably is. I probably like Legion more than I like Inhumans by the time it was done. And thankfully, nobody watched it, so when the MCU wants to do more with the Inhumans, they can.
Yeah, it's weird because, I'm nicer to it than a lot of others. I know so many people just despise that show for a number of reasons, and a lot of them were comic book related. I didn't have that same connection to it, but for me, the weird part of it really had more to do with the actors. And here's what because the one actor was a really awesome horrible. This particular actor played an awful, horrible character in Game of Thrones whose death I absolutely cheered for. But it was weird seeing him in that role. And then the other thing is Anson Mount, the actor who played Black Bolt. Well, his character in the show doesn't speak. So it wasn't until he played Captain Pike in Star Trek Discovery that I knew how he even sounded. And once I heard how he sounded, I actually got mad at Inhumans for not letting him speak. Because he's awesome. I know it's
the
part
character.
Of the character. I know. I know. That's irrational. But still. Yeah. But still, Anson Mount's an awesome actor, and they should let him speak because he's really cool, and he's been awesome on Star Trek Discovery, and he's getting his own show now, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and that's great. So I love that actor, but yeah, Inhumans is probably not high up on his list. I know there's probably somebody out there that has seen Hell's on Wheels that says he's good in that as well. I have not seen any of that either, but yeah, that's as much as I can say about Inhumans.
Fair enough.
Although I just really quick, I did like what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did with Inhumans. I did like that, and I don't know, not to bring up Civil War 2 again, but I guess I am, because Civil War 2 totally dealt with the Inhumans, but that was a good primer for me to understand how the Inhumans work at least structurally speaking. I'm sure that you and many others can point me in the directions of so many better Inhuman arcs with respect to
just about any of them. But Civil War II would have given you the basis for understanding like the Terrigen crystals and Terrigen mist and like.
Well, no, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did.
Oh, Agents okay. I thought you meant Civil War II because Inhuman is part of Civil War II. So
it is. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. like gave me the basis so that when I read Civil War II, I wasn't lost.
Okay, understood. I had that flipped in my head. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. No, not the best Inhuman story necessarily, but I liked it. I mean, I liked what they did with it. I think it was interesting, and Quake being an Inhuman I thought was cool. So no complaints on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. overall.
Cool. All right. This next one from McNichol. Interesting question. How come we've had more Superman live-action television shows than Batman live-action television shows? I think the short answer to this is rights. Fox has had a death grip on the rights to Batman live-action television. Has been like in the Fox script. That's why Gotham was on Fox. It all stems.
Basically, the only area with licensing DC has had to deal with that I can think of.
As far as live action television, I believe you are correct and this all stems from Batman 66. The fact that Fox has those rights from there and just hasn't given them up, like hasn't sold them. With all the companies switching hands, that did lead to a few people asking, well, now does that mean Disney owns the rights? Does Disney owns Batman television's rights? And I guess the answer technically is yes, but I'm sure deals and whatnot can be. I have a feeling that that's going to change, like in the not too distant future. I have a feeling that's going to be different.
It may have already changed. I mean, you're right, the Batman stuff on Fox, but we have Batwoman using Batman characters on the CW. Batman characters have been a part of the CW in the past. We have a version of Batman and Robin and Nightwing and stuff on streaming. And so I feel like things have changed kind of there. If I ever see Batman 66 on Disney Plus, that'll just be weird.
That'll be very weird. It won't make any sense. But streaming is the big thing here because those are different. Streaming rights are different than broadcast television rights.
True.
So quite honestly, the idea that we're going to see a Batman streaming we are. Well, okay, it's not Batman, but the Gotham City show that's going to be attached to the Batman movie with Robert Pattinson. It's going to take place during year one of Batman. So, but that's going to be a streaming show. Same way that Pennyworth is a streaming show on Epix. No, that is not a Batman show, but it's Alfred, a Batman character. And like what you said with Batwoman, those rules are getting more relaxed for sure, especially with the onset of streaming. So I don't know that it's going to remain that way with respect to more Superman live-action TV shows than Batman live-action TV shows, although we are about to get a new Superman live-action TV show in Superman and Lois, so we'll see how that goes.
I mean, Superman has been incredibly successful on television. There have been several series that have run for multiple seasons.
Superman and Clark Kent, because technically Smallville is a Clark Kent show.
Right. So Smallville, among all of them, is the most. But there was a Superboy show. There's the Adventures of Superman show. There was Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman. There's Supergirl, Superman adjacent, right? And upcoming Superman and Lois, and I'm probably forgetting stuff. And that doesn't even count animated. Superman has been very successful.
The George Reeves show, got to bring that up. The George Reeves show. Yeah.
I think Batman would be successful but they just haven't yet. And McNichol asked another question. Will drive-in movies become the only place to see movies with theater business losing a lot of money in businesses during this pandemic? So basically, are we stuck with drive-ins only? Well, if that's the case, I'm going to be missing a lot of movies because I do not like watching movies at the drive-in. But, I mean, right now it's the only truly risk-free or effectively risk-free method to go with.
If we're talking during the pandemic, yes. I mean, okay, if we're talking only place to see movies, there's three places. There's theater with risks, there's drive-in with less risks, and then there's streaming, right? Like, in your home is a place to see movies. I would count that as a place. But if
absolutely, you're right. Absolutely.
Right. But yeah, I don't, long term, I don't see especially now, it's cold here in Michigan. Who's sitting in a car at 20 degrees at a drive-in theater? Our drive-ins usually shut down like around September, October around here. So it doesn't work that way. And I don't know if or how the pandemic is going to change that, because I know Walmart and some other places have done drive-in movies. But during the pandemic, yes. Long term, which is what everybody's worried about, no, I don't think that drive-in movies are just... I think drive-in movies are going to stay, which is awesome. I do like that for the novelty. But I don't think... I think kind of... I feel like he's asking, are theaters going to die? Like, there's kind of an are theaters going to die undertone with this question. And no, I don't think... As I've said before, I think they will get to the niche. They will become the niche property. A lot of them, unfortunately, are going to go under as a result of this. There will be those that survive, and they will make a living with making it more of an event property going forward. All right, this next one from our good friend Travis. Here we go. Ready for this? What is your favorite DCCW crossover, and which one do you think is the best? Are they the same? If not, why? Well, leave it to Travis to get the brain thinking with respect to his questions. First of all, I will give you 1,000% credit for understanding the difference between favorite and best. Right? I go through this. The big one example I've used a lot lately in movies is Christopher Nolan. There's a difference between your favorite Christopher Nolan movie and the best Christopher Nolan movie. Yes, I would agree with people that Interstellar is probably his best movie. But my favorite of his movies is Inception. Like, there's a difference, for sure. Alright, so DCCW crossover. As I am pondering this, Brent, you go ahead and answer first.
I think I'm going to stick with what I said, last January. My favorite is still probably the Crisis on Infinite Earths. I know, Travis, you didn't really like that, but what they accomplished with that for me... Yes, overall, I think it was my favorite. That said, I might feel a little differently when I look back on it and realize, like, all this build-up for Supergirl and Batwoman didn't go anywhere, right? Like, all that time didn't go anywhere. And so, like, that is going to hurt it the next time I do sit down and watch it. But as of today, that is still where I'm at. As for the best, I think, looking back over them, I probably would go Crisis on Earth X as the best overall tightest story from start to finish. I mean, they all have little bits and pieces here where they're just like, try and get this character to participate for whatever reason in the crossover. Obviously, Infinite Earths did it more. Earth X has some of that too, but I think just start to finish, that's where I would probably have to say is the best. Did you come down? I'm betting Crisis on Earth X is somewhere in your brain right now, but where did you settle on this?
Yeah, you know what? I think that for me it is the same answer for best and favorite, and I think it is Crisis on Earth X. Because, you bring up a very good point about how Crisis on Infinite Earths, as epic and as crazy as it was, yeah, the next time you watch it, you're going to remember Ruby Rose isn't Batwoman anymore.
I don't think it's going to age as well.
No, unfortunately it isn't. And there were some awesome moments. And, my favorite moment by far is the final episode, the realization that all the Earths have merged. When Weather Wizard shows, or when Weather Witch shows up in National City and Flash and Supergirl meet Marv Wolfman, like, in the middle of dealing with her, and, hey, the realization that everybody's on the same Earth. That goes down as, like, one of my favorite DCCW moments of all time. But Crisis on Earth X, that story from start to finish was just, like you said, tight and flowed very well. From start to finish, it was extremely organic. You didn't find, the machinations for bringing everybody together were completely natural. Barry and Iris's wedding. Perfect. That's why they're all there. And I'm sorry, that church scene.
Yes. No, it is good.
I have watched that scene so many times because it's arguably the most badass action sequence in the entirety of the DCCW. To see all the power sets, to see everybody's abilities there, to see somebody like Oliver, who has no powers, still hold his own with the bow and arrow while everybody else is throwing ice and speed and
working
flight.
With Cisco to, like, go through Cisco's portals. It is
right.
That is definitely. We've talked about this before, but if it's not the best action set piece. It's in the conversation that the Arrowverse is given. It's in the conversation at the bare minimum.
It is, and I love the story. I do. The story itself, with respect to the Earth X characters and the parallels, the even going so far, with the really heavy stuff with Emily Bett Rickards, with her being Jewish, like that whole part, all of that was just a really good story. It was a really, really good story, really organically done. For me, Travis, that is best and favorite for me as far as DCCW crossovers.
All right, so next up from Omari Daniels, would you want to see a villain from one DCCW show appear on another, like when Bug-Eyed Bandit at first appeared on Arrow, or when the Clock King, Bug-Eyed Bandit, started on Arrow and then went to Flash, vice versa. Flash and Arrow, Clock King started on Arrow and then appeared on the Flash. He says he'd like to see Tobias or Odell from Black Lightning appear on Batwoman, especially since Odell we now know is from Gotham City. I would absolutely echo those sentiments. I would love to see Tobias especially. I would love to see Tobias on any other show. I think Batwoman is probably the best fit for overall. Okay, maybe not Legends. I don't want to see Tobias on Legends, but any other show, I would be very happy to see Tobias show up on it. And in general, I would just like to see Black Lightning the characters have a little bit larger appearance in the universe. So if that meant Tobias needed to not be in 1 or 2 episodes of Black Lightning so he could go up to Vancouver and be in Batwoman, okay, yes, I would be on board for that. I think that right there is the sweet spot. Tobias and Batwoman. That's the sweet spot for me. Yeah. But in general, yes, I love it when that's like when Bug-Eyed Bandit did that. I love that. Or Clock King. I mean, Clock King was played by Robert Knepper, who I absolutely love from Prison Break. So I just love the actor. So I was really excited when he came on Arrow, and then I was excited again when we saw him in The Flash. This universe used to do that kind of thing a little more often than they do now. And I would very much like to see that. Like Deathbolt was a character who showed up on Arrow. The Atom took him down while Oliver couldn't go out in public at the time. And then he later shows up in an episode of The Flash. I would like to see that stuff more often.
I feel like the biggest example that we've gotten of this is, when Reverse Flash and Damien Dark showed up on, were the heavies in season 2 of Legends of Tomorrow. Like, you're taking a Flash villain and an Arrow villain and putting them in Legends. Who was the third villain? Why am I forgetting who the third villain was in that group? Oh, it was Malcolm Merlin. Yeah. Yes, it was Merlin. All right, so 2 Arrow villains and a Flash villain together to cause problems for the Legends and for an entire season. Their own Legion of Doom. That was like the biggest example of this that we saw. And you're right, they did used to do it more back in the day, and we don't see a whole lot of it now. I would say that your best bet by far right now is Black Lightning and Batwoman. That is not just because Black Lightning actually references Gotham and went to Gotham in the final episode of season 3. The season finale of Gotham, or the season finale of Black Lightning, was in Gotham City. I mean, not all of it, but like when they were testifying, they were in Gotham. So not only for that reason, but also culturally speaking, because of Javicia Leslie. Because of her presence on Batwoman now, that absolutely, I can absolutely envision. In fact, now I kind of want to see this. Now that I want to see Ryan Wilder, even though we haven't seen any of her on screen yet. But knowing the presence that she's going to play on the show, being a black woman, a black lesbian on the show, I want to see her interact with Anissa. I know Grace is there, but still, I kind of want to see that interaction. Whether it's Thunder or Blackbird, whoever it is, shows up in Gotham, maybe to hunt Odell down, or maybe to hunt Tobias down, right? And I'd be great if Jeff and Jennifer came along with her, and you just had all of them there like that. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Yes, absolutely. Let's see that happen.
Sounds awesome to me.
Be fantastic for sure, and it would be. I could imagine Tobias and Alice. Oh, that'd be funny.
That would be good.
That would be fun to see that interaction.
I think just to give another pairing, just to have a different answer than what Omari gave us, King Shark on Superman and Lois. Just to see Superman and King Shark throw down, that would be fun too.
Oh, yeah, that would be very interesting. That'd be a nice. I don't know how those power sets match up, but
I
that'd
mean,
that'd be
Superman
a
would
cool
crush
one.
him overall, but it would still be fun to see.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. All right, this next one from Jeffrey. Okay, here we go. Here's a loaded one. We're staying in the DCCW here for a bit. He says, I wanted to ask what your thoughts are on the current status of Green Arrow and the Canaries. The current status being that there really isn't a current status per se. I'm hopeful the show will get picked up, but I'm kind of at the point where I'd just like to know something at all either way. Would have thought Fandom would have been a good time to say something, but I don't believe anything was said. You're right, nothing was said, Jeffrey. I know the current state of production has probably changed things, but I'm hopeful for some news soon. What do you guys think? Apologies if you guys have recently discussed this and I missed it, or if there's been news that I have missed. Thank you for your time and all that you do, and I hope you both have a great day. Thank you for that, Jeffrey. Thank you for listening. Appreciate that. No, we haven't heard any news, and I still want it. That backdoor pilot that they made for the last season of Arrow was really good. I really liked it. I really liked the implications of what they were doing. I liked that grouping with, with Mia and Laurel and Dinah. I liked that pairing. I liked the chemistry that they had. I liked what they were suggesting with respect to, future Star City and what was happening. Like, they set up a lot. And I really, and of course, we've talked before about, on DCTV, we talked about the redemption of Earth 2 Laurel Lance, and this just furthers that, and continuing down the Black Canary path that I've always wanted for her, that I'm glad she has. I want to see that continue. We haven't heard anything on it. I don't know where it's at. I really hope it's still in the back burner. I really hope it's still something there, but honestly, if we haven't heard anything about it now, that probably doesn't bode well for it happening, unfortunately. Which is sad. It really is. But
It
I
is.
mean, I'll keep my hopes up.
I echo everything you just said. I want it to happen. I really enjoyed it. I want Green Arrow and the Canaries. Even though I've questioned, are they getting too big with too many shows? I want Green Arrow and the Canaries to happen. One thing that I totally neglected on the last episode of Fans, the one that came out a few days ago, Mark Guggenheim has left the Arrowverse. And I think this was the show he was most likely to still have a heavier involvement in. I don't know that to be a fact, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And so, while it's still possible Green Arrow and the Canaries may come on, him leaving, I feel like confirming that like he's pretty much done with that chapter of his life, as he said, I feel like is not a good sign. So, asking me, today in mid-October of 2020, I am not confident that we will ever see Green Arrow and the Canaries again. And if that's the case at this point, hopefully Mia, if nothing else, can join the Wave Rider. Put her up.
Something to that effect, yeah. Because I
really like Kat McNamara as. I really like her in that role. I watched a little bit of her. Some other work she's done, and I liked her there. She was on a couple episodes of Michael Rosenbaum's podcast. As a person, I really like her, and so I would like her to stick around, but I don't want to lose the others either. I don't want to lose Katie Cassidy as Laurel. I don't want to lose Juliana Hargavay as Dinah. It is a loss. It is a loss to the universe with these characters being gone. I'm not confident today. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I will be sad. I will be very disappointed if they just let it go by the wayside. But unfortunately there's not a whole lot of reason to be optimistic about it just yet. But we'll hold out hope.
All right, next up from Stuart from Gears Knee. This is a question that would have been a little bit better had we got to it prior to the last episode of Fans, but I'm still going to address it here. In Snyder's Cut of Justice League, do you think we will get more scenes of Deathstroke? Joe posted on Twitter once saying that the Snyder Cut was announced that there were more scenes between him and Batman, but now Affleck's Batman movie isn't being made that we know of. Do we think that this would be cut from the movie now that plans have changed? Personally, he says, I would love to see a Snyder Deathstroke movie made for HBO Max. His style of filmmaking would completely suit Slade, and also could you imagine Deathstroke fight scenes at the level of the Martha Rescue? Going back to the last episode of Fans, I think I speak for us both that we think we're going to see more of Deathstroke in the Snyder Cut. So I don't think all of that lost footage will remain lost.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's going to be augmented more than likely with new footage. If we, again, going back to our last episode of Fans, if you connect dots, if you read tea leaves, you can see a logical reason why Joe Manganiello is going to be involved in additional photography as Deathstroke. Could absolutely see that. So, does that mean that the original plan for him will be completely resurrected? Don't know, because that could have included the Ben Affleck Batman movie that was originally going to happen. Not sure what the future of that is at all, but yeah, I mean, obviously, would like to see that. And if we're talking about, Deathstroke fight scenes on the level of the Martha Rescue, yeah, we spoke glowingly on DCTV back in the day about the Deathstroke fight scenes in Arrow, and how great great of a job James Bamford did with those episodes, and that stunt work. But this would be on a feature film budget, essentially. So, yes, I would expect nothing less than Martha Rescue level for that type of action. Martha Rescue is your bar as far as action with respect to that type of combat in anything involving Zack Snyder's Justice League. Anything that stems out of that, you can't go lower than Martha Rescue. So, yeah, if anything, Deathstroke action in that regard should be higher. Raise those stakes, because Deathstroke has some abilities that Batman doesn't have, and has, it's a similar style. But yeah, absolutely bring that on, and I think it's very logical to expect that we will get some more of that in the film. All right, this next one from Salvor Harden. He says, I wonder if there could be a future where the U.S. has no theaters, but the rest of the world does, at least for a couple of years, until streaming takes over everywhere. Oh, that's very possible. And in fact, that's kind of what we're seeing now. I've been reading reports that the U.S. now officially is no longer the number one film market. It is now China. China is now the number one film market in the world, and we don't know when that's going to change. We just don't know. And on top of that, when we do eventually get to a point where theaters are safe and people do feel safer to go back to theaters, who knows when that will be, you can't necessarily expect that the market is going to be as large as it was before. It could be a scenario where even after theaters are fully reopened in the United States, we're still not the number one market. Because a lot of those theaters will have gone under, and they're just not going to do the ones that are still in business aren't going to do the business that they did beforehand. And that's a harsh reality that I feel like a lot of people aren't ready to accept, is that we're not going back to the $1 billion days anytime soon. Like, that's just not in the cards. What we saw with Endgame and what we've seen with these comic book films, Aquaman, Joker, all that, those days have kind of been cut off really for a while, and I don't know that we'll get back to them, to be honest with you, especially with the onset of streaming and with some of the stuff that we talked about in our previous episode of Fans, with respect to what might happen if more movies start to get shopped, like the rumors that James Bond was getting shopped, and other movies that we know have been shopped and bought, like Greyhound and Enola Holmes and Coming to America 2. So, to be honest with you, I think there's most certainly the prospect of a future where the U.S. won't have theaters and every other market is bigger, and also a prospect of the U.S. having theaters open and other markets are still bigger.
And with that comes lower budgets. Most of these studios for the movies that we talk about on this show are based in the U.S. We're not seeing, we don't necessarily watch all of the movies from, the China movie studios, right? Honestly, I couldn't even tell you the name of a movie studio that's based in China. And with that, you brought up Bond that we talked about in the last week that has a last episode that has a budget of around $250 million. Those days, I think, are going to be quite a while from here. I was just thinking about the upcoming Marvel Phase 4 slate for movies, and there's only a couple of those that I feel like are going to approach that $200+ million budget potentially. And even those, they may not, because we don't definitively know what those stories are. For the record, Captain Marvel 2 and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness are the two that I have in mind as possibly going that big. I don't see any of the others doing it. Certainly not Shang-Chi, which just wrapped filming. Eternals and Black Widow, whatever those budgets were, that money's already spent effectively. But Thor: Love and Thunder is not going to have that big of a. I mean, the last Thor Ragnarok didn't have that kind of budget, but I think it's going to be a while. I wouldn't be surprised if the next Avengers movie had the smallest budget of any of the Avenger movies to date. And I mean, because if the U.S. is not able to be the market that it once was, the studios are making less money. Because, like we talked about last episode, they keep less of a cut of the money from China than they do from the U.S. And so that's why you get people who want to have arguments of a movie making so much money but making it all in China as it's not the same. It's not technically the same. It still is indicative of popularity of the movie, of people going to see it, because a person there is a person here. They're still buying their ticket. They're taking the time out of their schedule to go see it. But for the actual bottom line finances, it's not the same. The movie studios, let's just reverse the positions right now. Let's say China was the one that totally screwed the pooch on this whole COVID response thing, and America was the one that started to get it under control. I think these movies would be coming out. I think we would have seen Black Widow already. I would be confident we'd have Wonder Woman coming up. You know, like if it hadn't already released. I really think we would, because the studios keep so much more of the money on this side. They don't, and that's why. So until the U.S. gets its act together, we're not going to have those movies to that budget level again. It doesn't mean we won't have wonderful, great storytelling with everything involved in the movie process just being wonderful. It's just we're going to have budgets that are significantly less than $250 million. All right, next question from Leighton. He says, first of all, let me say how amazing your podcast is. I've been listening to your content for some time and love the stuff you put out. Leighton, thank you very much for that. He says, as much as I love to listen to podcasts, I also love to find out if other people do too. With you both hosting, I was wondering, do you listen to any other podcast outside of your podcast network based around the superhero genre? And if so, which is your favorite? Ray, do you listen to any shows outside of our network for this kind of content? On a regular basis. I know you've one-off stuff, but on a regular basis.
No, I would like to get back into, we have a number of mutual friends, and in the podcasting circles, obviously, Holy Batcast. I love that movie. Those types of shows. DC on Screen, of course, can't forget those guys. Mm-hmm. DC on Screen is probably the one that I've listened to the most, like, as far as just listening to other stuff, because those guys are hilarious.
They are.
And I thoroughly enjoy listening to a lot of their discussions. But none really, like, with regularity. The podcast, there is a podcast that I've been listening to lately that I just got into, but it's not centered around the superhero genre. And that's the Pod Directive, which is the now official Star Trek podcast hosted by Tawny Newsome, who plays Beckett Mariner on Lower Decks, and Paul F. Tompkins, who is a lifelong Trekkie. And what they've been doing on that show is they've been doing, like, they did a bunch of interviews in the summer, like real-world interviews with people about the impact of Star Trek on their lives. And, like the first episode, they talked to Ben Stiller about the impact of Star Trek on his life and how he's a huge fan of the original series. Most recently, they talked to Stacey Abrams about how Star Trek impacted her. Nice. They did a really awesome episode where they talked to a couple of writers and Michelle Hurd from Picard about blackness in Star Trek. And it was really awesome because, it's 4 black women having this incredible conversation about different episodes of the show and how, culturally speaking, the show has dealt with black culture. And it was over an hour long. It was a fantastic episode. I loved it. It was great. And they take that kind of tact with it. But that's been the most recent podcast outside of our network that I have really, listened to with any regularity.
Well, I listen to tons of podcasts, not just the geek superhero space, but like a lot of technology with the Apple focused podcast. I'm going to leave all those aside. I thought about it, and I made a list of, like, the shows that talk about the kind of stuff that we talk about. And it's a long list, I realize. And there are segments that I may skip. For example, I'm going to mention the Super Civil Servants podcast. Great friends with those guys, and they were reviewing The Boys. Well, I would skip those segments because I was way behind on The Boys. I'm now caught up, but unlike other people, but I could now listen to a conversation about The Boys, and I wouldn't be worried about spoilers. But in general, I pretty much listen to just about every episode, and I'm going to list these all off You mentioned Holy Batcast and DC on Screen. Absolutely. There's also the DC Fan Show, DC Alliance, Supergirl TV Talk, Superman and Lois TV Talk. And then on the Marvel side, there's the MCU Fan Show, that's like DC Fan Show. That's both Sean Gerber shows. And then there's the Marvel Alliance. And then I mentioned Super Civil Servants. Like, I fumble that name every time. Thanks, Greg, for that name. But there's Superhero Discussions, Star Wars Alliance, World's Finest True Believers. Those are all of the...
Thank you for bringing that one up. Have we both been on that show?
World's Finest True Believers? And conversations have happened for a return for me. I'll just leave it at that because we're still a little ways out. But
okay.
The selection has been made. I'll just say that for now. Anyway,
all right.
Those are all part of Geek Ultimate Alliance. And I've guested on a number of those shows a number of times. I've been on like 4 or 5 of the Marvel Alliance, for example. Great, fun network. It's like us. They talk about this stuff and they talk about it from a place of love, and they'll tell you if they don't like something, but they're approaching it from the I'm probably going to like this perspective. And then, of course, Beer with Geeks. I mentioned them. They're from the same groups as gives Supergirl TV Talk. I talk with those guys personally a lot about Apple stuff because they're both Apple nerds like me, but not every one of their episodes is like this kind of geekery. Sometimes they talk about other things, but it's a great show, and I would absolutely encourage someone to check it out. So I listen to so many podcasts, but when you listen to them at greater than 2x speed and you have a 35-minute drive to work every day, I have the time for it. So I make the time for it because there's so many of these shows that, like, when they come out, I want to listen to it next. So I told Frank and Tim from Supergirl TV Talk, I'm like, oh man, Supergirl's ending. That means your show's going to end. That sucks. So, because that was part of my tradition, was always watch Supergirl and then in a day or two, Supergirl TV Talk. And I loved listening to that. So, yes, check out all those shows. Great stuff.
Yeah, tons of content out there. That's awesome. All right, here we go. From Reco Jet. He's taking us back to DCCW here. He says, as you know, huge fan of you and Ray, but also a huge DCW fan. Thank you for that, Reco. So just wanted to give my take on the current state of the DCCW. I should start by saying I began my watching of DCCW early quarantine. My favorite show by far was Arrow, but I enjoy them all. But unlike most people, I'm a physical media guy, so I've watched the entire Arrow series, Flash seasons 1 through 5, Supergirl seasons 1 through 4, and a lot 1 through 4, plus all of Crisis.
Lot is Legends of Tomorrow.
He means Legends of Tomorrow. Gotcha. He abbreviated that. My bad. Wow. It was in all caps. I didn't catch it. Got it. All right. All of Crisis via Blu-ray and DVD, and have just recently started collecting the new seasons, so there are some episodes I'm behind on. Supergirl is my favorite Kryptonian, so I'm very sad to see her go. Does see why one Kryptonian is more than enough for the DCCW. Didn't have enough time to get attached to Kate, so hopefully Batwoman can fill my Arrow hole. It's probably the closest show to Arrow at this point, I would say.
Well, James Bamford went to Batwoman and worked on some of the stunts on Batwoman, and you could tell. So
yes, you could.
You could tell.
Yes, you most certainly could. No question.
Some of the action in those later episodes, good stuff.
Oh yes, very much so. Yeah. As for Flash and Legends of Tomorrow, they're both very unique. So once they go, I don't see a replacement for either. So maybe Black Lightning could fill a bigger role there. I totally agree that the JLS table setup feels almost irrelevant at this point, so I'd like to see them try to repair it a bit, although admittedly I don't have any answers. Neither do we, really, I don't think. I do overall have questions regarding the futures of Martian Manhunter and the cast of Green Arrow and the Canaries. How sure are we that show is happening? We addressed that earlier, unfortunately, so we know how we feel there. And with it being set in the future, will we ever see crossovers with that cast? Well, that's a possibility. If the Legends go to the future... Yeah, if the Legends go to the future, they could run into them. Maybe that could happen.
I want Sarah to show up. I wanted Sarah on an episode of Green Arrow and the Canaries so bad too, and
that because it made total sense. Obviously, to have the white have the White Canary / former Black Canary, like original Black Canary in the DCCW, to be with Dinah and Laurel. Yes, absolutely. But here we go. Here's the big one. And with the recent Green Lantern show announcements not including Jon Stewart, what does that say about the future of Diggle Lantern? Well, Brent, what do you think?
Let's address Martian Manhunter first. I think I've said he is like the main character from the Supergirl cast I would like to see continue. Others, absolutely. I'd like to see more of Brainy, more of Alex, more of. But Martian Manhunter, he's the main one I would like to see continue. I don't want to just see all these people fold into the Superman and Lois cast or whatever, like they're replaceable with each other, like Superman and Supergirl, because they're not. They're not the same character, even though they have the same power set. But we haven't heard anything. And I'm not really that surprised at that, because if we were to start hearing what the Supergirl cast might be doing post Supergirl, that would potentially spoil things on Supergirl. And we don't want that. So we still want everybody's outcomes to be up in the air as we go through this final season. Diggle, he is effectively Jon Stewart. His stepdad's last name is Stewart. It's their way of basically retconning it into him being who. To me, I really, really hope we have not seen the last of him. Obviously, I want to see his Green Lantern. I think it's been earned. I think it's deserved. I think the network can do it. I want to see it. I think they could do it. One, the Green Lantern show on HBO Max, they've given zero indication that it has anything to do with the CW. So until they say otherwise, I assume it's like Titans or Doom Patrol. It's its own thing. Multiverse, yes. Universe, no. Not the same universe. I don't see that show stopping him from being Green Lantern. I don't see it, even if they included Jon Stewart, I don't see that stopping it because of the way that they're diving into the multiverse. DC is not afraid of that the way they used to be. My best case scenario right now is probably that he becomes a recurring guest star that floats around the different shows. And while I would like him to have a home show that he is a part of the cast for, I don't know that David Ramsey wants that. After 8 years of Arrow, maybe he doesn't want that. Maybe he's willing to do a little bit. But man, if we never see him as Green Lantern, then that little blip in the season finale of Arrow means nothing. And so I really do hope that we at least get... He mentioned moving to Metropolis. I hope if nothing else he shows up in a couple episodes of Superman and Lois. We just don't know, but fingers crossed.
I think, unfortunately, what you brought up earlier with respect to Guggenheim leaving the DCCW could be an indicator for that as well, sadly. Because I agree with you that I don't think that there are any barriers, and because I think some people are still in that mindset of there's barriers of if they're doing it here, then they can't do it there. And DC's made it abundantly clear this year that is no longer the case. We're going to have the Green Lantern show. And then the Green Lantern core movie, I mean, that's still out there. The idea of them doing that
which will probably
film,
have Jon Stewart in it.
Right. More than I keep going back to the rumors that it's going to be Hal and John in kind of a buddy cop scenario. So that will be a Jon Stewart. No, it likely wouldn't be David Ramsey. But just because those are happening, those do not eliminate the possibility of David Ramsey being on the DCCW. What could eliminate that, unfortunately, is that perhaps of the showrunners that are still there just isn't juice for it. Like I don't know this for certain either, but perhaps all the juice for it was with Mark Guggenheim. And when he leaves, that also kind of goes as well. I hope that's not the case. Same as I hope it's not the case with Green Arrow and the Canaries. I hope others pick up the baton and continue it going, but I feel like I'm kind of in the same place with that I am with Green Arrow and the Canaries. I have hope, but I'm not terribly optimistic.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Next up from Big B. Thoughts on this photo of Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne, Zoe Kravitz, and Selena Kyle. As Pattinson as Bruce Wayne, Zoe Kravitz as Selena Kyle, and Colin Farrell as Penguin. Could Bruce and Penguin be friends? And is Selena working for the Penguin and dating Bruce? It's like a set photo of the three of them that had come out. Honestly, I didn't think much of it because it's just several core cast members meeting in what is probably their real identities. I wouldn't at all be surprised to later get a shot of all of them in their respective costumes, their respective comic book looks. As for could Bruce and Penguin be friends, or Selena working for Penguin and dating Bruce? Selena trying to date Bruce, to me, is the only one I would say sure, because there's a lot of history there from other mediums. Yeah, the others could be the case. We just have no way of knowing right
now. So there's a couple of, because I'm torn on this, because on the one hand, and I mentioned this before on the show, is these Batman set photos need to stop. That particular photo he's talking about is one that I really didn't want to see, only because I don't want to speculate. I want to be some level of surprise on it, but I have seen the photo, and more so, I've seen the other another version of the photo that has John Turturro's Carmine Falcone in the shot. So, if we're gonna speculate, if I'm gonna answer the question, even though I don't really want to, because I don't want to speculate on this, I would say no. I don't think it's a case where I think that what speculation totally. We know based on the trailer that there's a funeral for someone. It looks like they've all attended this funeral for whatever reason. I think that's literally the only reason that they're together, is that whoever died, whoever's funeral they're at, there's a reason for each of them to be there. And they just all happen to be in that shot for whatever reason. I don't think it implies that there's anything going on between the three of them or Falcone being involved as well. I just think it's something that Gothamites are at. You know, like there's a reason Falcone's there, there's a reason Oz is there, there's a reason Bruce Wayne is there, and Selina doesn't need a reason. She can find whatever reason she wants to be there, especially if she is taking the, you know, if from all indications, this really does feel like a Selina Kyle that is much closer to what we saw with Anne Hathaway in The Dark Knight Rises and the version that we got in Batman the Animated Series, not so much the Michelle Pfeiffer version from Batman Returns. So if she's playing that up as the cat burglar and the, you know, the kind of hobnobbing with the wealthy socialites, then yes, that would be a reason that she would be at that funeral and dressed the way that she is in the photo. But no, I don't think that it implies anything between any of the three characters at all. I just think they're there because of who died. That's just my own pure speculation. All right, this next one from our good buddy Tim Rooney. Here's a good one. What are your Desert Island
How did I
books?
not mention the Anything Goes podcast with Tim Rooney? It's like Beer with Geeks. It's not always this kind of stuff. I apologize, Tim Rooney. It's not always this kind of stuff. But it's been... He definitely does cover this kind of stuff. And I've been on the show talking about this stuff. I'm going to get a text message for that. Mark my words, I'm getting a text message for that.
Or a tweet. Or both.
Or both. I mean, we text all the time, so or both.
Indeed, yes. Anything up?
I apologize.
I still love that title because I know where it comes from, and it's fantastic. But his question here, yes, what are your Desert Island books? The stories that are the anchor to your respective fandoms. I have a sinking feeling Brent will have at least one Spider-Man book on there. Yes, what a brand new day.
You know what? I deserve that. I deserve that right now. I deserve that. That is definitely not an anchor to my fandoms.
No, not at all.
The plank I'm going to jump off of.
Right. Yeah. Okay. For me, I'll make this. I'll go ahead and throw some of mine out there. I mean, obviously, Cosmic Odyssey. I've talked about that a lot. That was the book that I talked about on World's Greatest True Believers with Chris Belga. That particular arc for sure. Outside of that, I feel like a lot of, let's see, if he's talking about like stuff that we've read, because obviously there's stuff that like I would like to read that I probably would take with me on the desert island to read for the first time.
That's a gamble, because what if you hate it? Oh,
it is
man.
a gamble.
Oh.
It is a gamble for sure. But honestly, I would try and restrict it to the stuff that you guys have really hyped up, like Scott Snyder's Batman run. And like the new 52 Green Lantern stuff, like that kind of, or you know, but like as far as stuff that I've read, Cosmic Odyssey for sure. I would take New 52 Aquaman. That omnibus was fantastic. That was very good. And I would probably also any Dan Jurgens Superman. Yeah, any Dan Jurgens Superman, and I haven't read all of it, but definitely Death of Superman and World Without a Superman / Funeral for a Friend, for sure. You know, yeah, the Dan Jurgens Superman basically is I would anything from that run I would bring with me, and that would be some great desert island content for me.
You know, I originally was thinking of this question from a perspective of like, yes, Spider-Man. What's one of my favorite Spider-Man books? Throw it in my pile, right? But then I started thinking about that anchor to the fandom. And I thought, maybe my answer isn't actually the same. Looking at it from that perspective, I've got to name two big 90s and all their glory series. And you got to remember, I was born in 82. The 90s for me was like my comics heyday, as I really was coming into my own as a comics fan.
We're children of the 90s. I know we were born in 82, but we're children of the 90s.
Maximum Carnage and X-Men's Executioner Song. Executioner Song, as 90s glory as it is probably still my favorite X-Men title. I love that story. I've read it so many times. Maximum Carnage, huge, massive Spider-Man team up with Spider-Man and several people, allies and friends that some he recruits and goes after, some who just falls into it by circumstance, versus Carnage and his respective group. I love Maximum Carnage. I love Executioner, so I probably got to include both of those. And then, that gives me some Spider-Man, that gives me some X-Men. So then I'm like, I don't know what my limit is, but I'm going to go ahead and throw in the Return of Superman trade paperback. The trade paperback that I once in elementary school asked if I could skip recess so I could stay in and read the comic book, where Superboy was introduced with the Eradicator and Cyborg and Steel. That era of that, I love that story. So I'd have to mention that.
Dan Jurgens?
Yes, so much part of that. And Tom Grummett's Superboy, and so much a part of that. And then I thought, there's one other character, though, that I need representation of. It has to be there. It's got to be a Green Lantern. And so I really thought about it. And, well, I'm not, the one I'm picking, people may not like this. I get it. I understand why, but I'm going to say it. It's still probably the finest Green Lantern story that exists, in my opinion, the Sinestro Corps War. I understand why people will have their issues with the creative team behind that. You don't have to tell me. I get it. But for just a straight Green Lantern story, especially when I already know I have all my knowledge, I'm not doing this for a new reader, it's for me, I'm going to have to say the Sinestro Corps War. And then I guess just to give a little bit of non-Marvel and DC in there, let's say a couple volumes of Invincible, because, man, I love Invincible. So got some Spider-Man, some X-Men, some GL, some Superman, some Invincible. I'm covering a wide range of my own fandoms there.
I just looked up the creative team for that.
Sinestro Corps? Yeah.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was where you were going, but I didn't know who. I see. I understand. And I get it. And that's, it's the whole separating of art and the artist type deal again.
I've been reading recently. I've got like 3 issues left. The Robert Venditti run on Green Lantern. It's Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. And I tell you, I will put it right up there. Forget the whole artist and art thing. Just as great as Johns' run was on Green Lantern, I will put this run of Venditti's right up beside it. And at times, maybe even it's reaching above certain elements of the Johns. It is so good. Van Sciver does do some of the art for some of the issues. He's not every issue, but he's on a few of them. But it is such a good run. So I might, because you understand the other stuff, I might even tell you personally, when you decide to read some Green Lantern, to read Hal Jordan and the GLC first. It came out in the Rebirth era. It's all going to be on DC Universe.
Oh, I've read it.
Did you read a chunk of it?
I've read about maybe 10 to 15 issues of it.
Oh man, you've so much. I'm just going to tell you this: the Green Lanterns take on General Zod, and
yeah, I think
it is so good.
I don't know if I got to that point.
It's later. It's later in it. So, but yeah. It is so good. The whole run's about 50 issues.
Well, because that was like that point where I was trying to read like all of Rebirth, and right. I was reading that and Green Lanterns, and quite honestly, between the two, I gravitated toward Green Lanterns more than I did that one. Not that that was a bad book. Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps was a good book.
And honestly, it's kind of a bad title because John Stewart, Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner, they're all every bit as big of in the book as Hal Jordan is.
They really are, and it really, at least for the issues I read, it felt like Hal was on an island compared to all the others.
It kind of starts that way. And it would have, especially then, but for reasons that don't really matter, the Corps was thought lost. Hal thought he was on his own. And when they find each other again, they're just a team. Stewart is clearly the leader. He's the leader of the Green Lantern Corps at this point, and they're just a team. And you've got so much good stuff with the Sinestro Corps in that, where they actually work with them for a while. You've got the fight against Zod. You've got stuff with the Dark Stars where it ends. Several other just awesome stories. God, it's so good. So that's the one I'll tell you to read.
All right, fair enough. Might have to add Far Sector to that too down the road.
Maybe. Let's see how that one wraps up, but the potential is definitely there. All right, last question from Super Santa. Is there a definitive version of Lois Lane? The reason I ask is someone on another show, not DC related, said Terry Hatcher is the most definitive Lois Lane and that Amy Adams is the worst Lois Lane. Okay. There's a definitive version of Lois Lane to you. Kind of like when you've heard me say the definitive Batman is the 90s Batman animated series. Really, to me, is the answer there. Just like Mark Bagley is my definitive take on Spider-Man from an artistic standpoint. I get why somebody would say that about Terry Hatcher. She's a fantastic Lois Lane. Amy Adams is the worst Lois Lane? I couldn't necessarily go there. I guess I would probably, if you wanted me to rank them, probably put... Is it Kate Bosworth who did Superman Returns?
Yes, that was Kate
Bosworth. That's probably who I would pick, but even she didn't get much to do. But no, Amy Adams is a perfectly fine Lois Lane. I don't have a complaint about her as Lois Lane. I mean, I guess if you're a comic purist, the hair will get you, but whatever. As Lois Lane, she's totally fine.
Yeah, you know, like I like best lists are positive. Worst lists, it's like I hate saying worse. I don't like saying that. I struggle to think of a Lois Lane that I have any issues with. And I haven't, you know, I don't know that I can necessarily comment so much on Terry Hatcher because I didn't watch a whole lot of Lois and Clark. I only saw bits and pieces of it here and there. But I've seen plenty of Loises. And obviously the Lois Lane that I grew up with was Margot Kidder. Yes. Sure. Certainly, for sure. That's the one that I grew up with. That's from the Superman 78 film. Yes, definitely. But Amy Adams is fantastic as Lois. I like, they all have their own different ways of playing the character based on the universe that they are in. Margot's version fit for what they did with the Christopher Reeve films. Just like Amy Adams' version fits very well within the Snyderverse, if you will, like with respect to Man of Steel and BVS and what we will see of her now in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Whether she's involved in additional photography or not, we know a good chunk of her storyline will be put back in that film. Cool. But by the same token, you know, I could point to Noel Neill, who played Lois Lane in the George Reeves show, which I've watched a good amount of episodes of that. She worked for that show, right? It worked for that environment that she was in. Kate Bosworth, for as much as she did in Superman Returns, still worked for what the movie was doing. Yeah, they're all different. For even Elizabeth Tulloch, who's our current Lois in the DCCW, introduced in we talked about it when she got cast. I thought that was really good casting because I saw her on Grimm and I'm like, she'll work. She'll definitely work out as Lois, and I think she has so far, and I'm very intrigued to see what that dynamic is going to be for Superman and Lois. If you're a fan of Erica Durance's version,
that's the one I was thinking Smallville. Of as my favorite would be Erica Durance right now. Maybe Betsy Tulloch will get there. I need to see some Superman and Lois, but right now Erica Durance for me is where it's at.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a bad Lois. I really do. I think that we rank our Loises. I mean, definitive.
And then the 90s cartoon, the 90s Superman show. I mean, that Lois, and oh my gosh, her name's escaping me of who the voice actress is there, so I feel terrible about that right now. But that Lois, it's like, definitive really just means your favorite. And like I said, the definitive Batman to me is the Batman 90s. It is probably most people's opinion. I bet you that's a very popular opinion. But several people will agree with me about Erica Durance being their favorite Lois, but it's not going to be yours, Ray, and it may not be someone else's. Someone else may prefer Terry Hatcher. Someone else may prefer Amy Adams or Margot Kidder or Kate Bosworth even, if that's their jam. So...
Dana Delaney was the voice.
Thank you.
Dana Delaney was the animated Lois.
Thank you.
And apparently Mae Whitman played an 8-year-old version of her. I'd still need to watch that show, so I haven't seen that. But yeah, I mean, if we're picking favorite, it's difficult because I really like Amy Adams' version. I really do. But if we're talking about ones that I grew up with...
You had so much more time with Margot Kidder.
I did. I have. You know, I've just seen that one more, and there was a lot of that version that I liked a lot, that I still like to this day. So if I'm picking a favorite at this point, it probably is Margot Kidder, even though I really like Amy Adams. Really like her version in there. And again, I like them all. They're all good. You know, it's okay to like them all. We haven't said that in a while.
Well, with that, we have cleared the decks on what I have saved for questions from Twitter or email. So we'd love to hear any feedback you guys might have. Send in more questions. You can email us at borderlessfans@gmail.com.
And we're also on Twitter. I am at the Flightcast.
The show is at Borderless Fans. I am at Brent Tech Prime.
And as always, you can find us and the other shows in our network at squadcastmedia.com.
See you later.
Take care, guys. Stay safe out there.